Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesingrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesingrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. Hey, everybody. Good to have you with us today. And amazingly, we have Sandra Champlain with us today. A lot of you may know Sandra from her We Don't Die radio podcast, and she's also on Shades of the Afterlife from Coast to Coast Radio. And I don't know if I told you last time, Sandra, but I listened to Coast when I was doing music all the time because we'd play late. And so I'd be driving home, and it was always my go-to on the radio to listen to Coast. So how did you get associated with that?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. After my book came out, I had a friend who said, I'm going to be your publicist. The book changed my life. I want to help you. And so she said, you need to get on radio shows, TV shows and stuff. And I said, okay, whatever you think. So she would just make calls, and I didn't know what she was doing. And I remember clearly I was driving around just outside of Boston. It was pouring rain, and my phone rang, and I was talking to a producer, like a preliminary interview. I had my Bluetooth on, so I had both hands on the wheel, and she was asking me lots of questions. And I said, yes. And I say yes to every interview. It's just what I do. No matter how big, no matter how small, it doesn't matter. And she says, okay, so I'd really like to do this. I'm going to email you details. We're going to call you 2 a.m. Eastern. And I'm thinking, 2 a.m. Wow. I said, who am I talking to? And then it hit me. My friend Kathy, she said she must have reached out to Coast AM 20 times. And that was the beginning. And then every so often they would call me to be a guest. And my book hit number 1 on Amazon that night too, which was great. Incredible in US, UK, and Canada. It was wild. Wow. And so it was just over 4 years ago, the producer from Coast to Coast, Tom Danheiser is his name, he and George were starting a paranormal podcast network along with iHeartRadio. And they had some other ideas, but they really wanted to do an Afterlife one. And he said, I was wrestling in my brain who would be the perfect host. And he says, I've listened to your shows. You've been on Coast to Coast. And he says, it's you. And so he trained me how to really do those podcast segments with so much integrity. And I would give it all that I've got. So 4 years now, I have, I think I just recorded number 218. Wow. So I have 218 episodes of that. And there are commercials on that that's just how they pay the bills and things. Whereas at We Don't Die, it's strictly one-on-one interviews that I have with people, and not edited, just get 100% of the guests who are on. Whereas Shades of the Afterlife, there could be different topics within each episode. There's some interviews that come on there and clips of people talking, but it's a lot more me, of my research and all the things that I found out. So I'm so grateful, you wouldn't believe, because although many people have found We Don't Die Radio on YouTube and on their favorite podcast, whatever they use, app, there's a lot of people that listen to Coast, and they promote it like crazy. So I'm super grateful to be able to get to the right people who are appreciating it, because each human being, as you know, we all grieve. And sometimes the way in is to hear afterlife. What? Afterlife? Shades of the Afterlife. And then within it, obviously, in every episode, I deliver really good information about why we can comfortably believe in the afterlife. But I inject information about grief in each and every episode, because we human beings deal with it. So yeah, that's how I got involved, and I'm so grateful.
Yeah, did you know about Coast to Coast before that? Yeah,
I did. Yeah, I did. I knew about it. I wasn't a big listener, just because I like to sleep. But I did hear, because it's on in the wee hours where I live. I am. It's 1 to 5, 1 to 4 a.m., something like that, on the East Coast, and yeah, I knew of it. But to me, that's like going on one of the biggest shows in the world. I think it actually is. I think it's might be the 10th largest radio show or something. I don't know. It's some huge thing. So I am eternally grateful.
Always loved it. And so great to see you on there. You do a great job, by the way. You're accomplishing everything you wanted to on there, for sure. So we got a little far ahead there, but I want to introduce you, of course, to everybody and have you tell your story and let us know all about you, and so that we can cover all of those things that'll come back around, I'm sure. So why don't you tell us, Sandra, let us know more about you and everything that you do, some amazing things.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And your folks can find our interview, and I got to interview you on WeDon'tDie.com. So anyways, back to me. I am someone who has grown up with some fantastic parents, John and Marion Champlain. My dad is in the spirit world now. But one thing is, they taught us kids very young that you got to see it to believe it. Dad was an airline pilot, mom a travel agent. They never got into any of the, I call it the woo-woo stuff, the spiritual stuff. We had somebody in our town that was supposedly a psychic. She had written books, and she made a prediction that the Maid of the Mist boat there at Niagara Falls would capsize with a boatload of deaf children. Right. So the world was all on edge thinking that's going to happen.
It did not.
Didn't. And I
can verify that.
Yes, I know it. But that was the thing. And so my parents really instilled in us, you got to see it to believe it, truly. And so I grew up skeptical about all that stuff. Oh, I don't even want to say skeptical. It was just, I was a disbeliever. We did go to church. Now, my parents had us in public school, and then they moved us to Catholic school. So we were kind of forced into religion, but it was something we did. We went to church every Sunday. But did I believe into it? Did I find a relationship with God and Jesus? I'd have to say no. So just being of the Catholic faith did not give me faith. And it was in the mid-90s, Tom, that I went through a fear of dying. It was crazy how I couldn't even go to bed at night thinking, if this was my last night, and Sandra stopped, like, what would happen? Would anything happen? And it developed into an incredible fear. My mom has the belief that because I worked in nursing homes when I was young and volunteered and I saw a lot of death at a young age, that somehow that crept in. I don't know if that's the case or not, but little did I know then, it set me up to be where I am now. So this tremendous fear crippled me. It was always there, and it pushed me into doing some research into, can I believe in something? Can I believe that there is something after death? And I say, I was skeptic, but I was kind of nasty about it. I really felt that these stories of near-death experiences and people seeing the light, that was just a normal part of our brains shutting down. And I would talk about this like I knew it to be a fact, right? I had never done any research or anything. I just knew it. And then Barnes and Noble bookstores and Borders books were big back in the day. And, I'd go through them for whatever book, and then I'd see that spirituality section. And I actually felt sorry for the people that were buying those kind of books. And I thought, folks, there's no proof of that stuff. So, good luck to you. So, yeah, not so nice. As a career, who I've been is I'm a trained chef. My mom and I started a catering business for race car teams. So we traveled all over the US and Canada, and we'd set up a big tent and we'd serve breakfast, lunch, dinner buffets from anywhere from 400 people to 1,500 people. We had a staff that traveled with us, or we'd get some local help. So I am a hard worker. We were busy all the time, lots of cuts and burns and bruises to prove it. And then in 2020, when COVID hit, we lost our business, unfortunately. But again, that put me on the path to being with you here today. But back in those days, Skeptical Sandra started just researching. First, I started with religion to see if there was something that could calm that fear. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to calm that awful fear that I had within me. And there's beautiful stories of faith and the afterlife in 99% of the world's religions, but it didn't do anything to quench that thirst that I had. And then I ended up going to see a medium do a stage show with a friend of mine. Now, I just did it for something to do, because in my mind, if somebody got a reading, they were planted in the audience, right? So that's how I had it. And the stage show was really good. It wasn't a lot of money. And I felt very emotional when the medium would give readings, because I guess it just told me these people aren't planted in the audience. Nobody's here to make a lot of money. This really seemed like something authentic. And all of a sudden, that inner voice said, gosh, if you could learn something like this or go to a medium, maybe you could get proof that we go on and this fear would disappear. So I'm somebody, instead of going to a medium, I go to take a class on how to be a medium, right? Because it was the same lady that had done the stage show, and she made a promise that if you are called to be at this workshop, you are somebody who can accurately tell the deceased people around others. And that's a bold statement, because number one, if this was real, certainly I wouldn't have this gift. And come to find out all these years later, we all have it, folks. We are all spiritual beings having a human experience. But just like playing the piano, if you don't take the time to learn and practice, you're not going to do it. But I think everybody who's watching or listening right now has had hunches. They've known the phone was going to ring, and, all these kinds of things that have happened to all of us. Long story short, I take a 3-day workshop on mediumship out in California. I lie to the whole world saying I'm going there for, like a business retreat kind of thing. And there I am sitting in class. And the very first day, the instructor said, we're not going to do a medium reading right now, but I'm going to let you know how this goes. So she says, everybody grab a partner. And she said, just sit knee to knee and hold hands if you feel comfortable doing that. Oh, okay. So I didn't know anyone at all. So this nice lady and I said, oh, let's be partners. Okay. So the instructor gave us the basics. She says, I just want you to close your eyes. She says, I want you to just imagine there's a big bubble of love surrounding you two. And then she says, whoever goes first, just invent in your mind that there's a person standing behind your partner. Is it a man? Is it a woman? Do you have a feeling? Is it a grandparent or sibling or whoever? And then there's usually some evidence that it's really them. So what do they look like? What did they do for work? And she says, just invent it, because I just want to give you an experience. So she says, make it all up, right? So it takes all the pressure off, doesn't it? Make it all up. And then very often there's a message that comes through. I said, okay. So I'm creative as a chef. So I said, I'll go first. Because she told me to make it up, I didn't have any nerves or fear, right? Because I'm just making it up, which is a key to all of this, because when nerves and fear kick in, it seems like that shuts down that soul's ability. So with my eyes closed, I just invented that there's a man standing behind this nice lady. I saw a man who had windburned skin and blonde hair and a big gap between his teeth. And I'm telling her the story about what he looks like. I feel like it's your grandfather on your mom's side. And then I get this picture of a fishing boat. And I said, oh, he was a fisherman in Denmark, right? Made up Denmark. And see him puffing away on a cigarette and coughing. Died of lung cancer. His name was Jan, right? That's a good name for Denmark people. And then, my eyes are closed. I'm not getting any response from her. And I said, he never told your mom that he loved her and wants you to give that message, that he feels sorry. He was a tough, kind of a rough father, but he really loves his daughter and he's proud of her and things. So I opened my eyes with just the intention to say, okay, it's your turn. You're next. And this woman's crying. Her grandfather's name was Jan. He was a fisherman in Denmark, died of lung cancer, had the big gap in his teeth. And she heard stories that, he never said, I love you. And he never hugged his daughter, which is her mother. So that was a holy cow moment for me. Oh my God, right? How did that happen? And then she went and did this for me and perfectly described my grandfather, how he walked with his cane. She got his name, that he had a big German Shepherd dog. And that was like, there's something to this. And this is the very first time that I started feeling like, okay, we go on. And that fear started to dissipate.
What? I'm picturing the scene and I'm picturing this happening. You mentioned a little bit about your reaction, but what were you doing then when you open up your eyes and she's like that? I mean, were you just like, whoa, blown away? Or did, you just didn't carry on normally or anything, right?
No, it took my breath away. It took my breath away. And, even when I tell the story, sometimes it feels like it happened to somebody else. It's like, it happened to me.
Yeah.
And I've got another one of those stories that was like, oh my gosh, if you'd like me to continue with
Absolutely.
some more. Okay, I need to just clear up that weekend now, although that was a miraculous happening, when all of a sudden now I had to try to be a medium, it seemed like that flow of information turned off because I felt like there was an expectation and I had to be good at it. So while there were times that I was right, there were other times that I was way off, right? And the same with everybody. But it helped me understand that there's something to this. So I came home and said, somehow there's got to be a way to find out more about this. And so I went back to Barnes and Noble bookstore and I went into that section where I was laughing at all the people. And there, lo and behold, is a book called The Idiot's Guide to Communicating with Spirits.
Of course there is.
Of course. So that's the book for me, right? A bright orange. I purchase it. Now, at this time, I'm living in Massachusetts, just north of Boston. And so the book is written by a medium who's also a minister of spiritualism. Now, I hadn't heard about spiritualism before, but as it was described, it is similar to a Christian service, similar, you get all the prayers and whatnots. But in addition, at the end of the service, the minister works the audience as a medium, which those of you who know me and come to our Sunday gatherings, that is what we do online now that we've been doing for the last 4 years. Pretty darn cool. But anyways, I find this book, I learn about spiritualism. The medium who wrote the books, not just a medium, she's a spirit artist. So she not only will tell you who your loved ones are, she'll draw a picture of them. So throughout the book are pictures of the people that she saw in her mind's eye, and then also as they lived. And they were the exact same people. They were just so close. She was a great artist. And I thought, wow. So I thought, how does one find a spiritualist church to go to? Because I thought that would be the next step, because they do these trainings and things. So I turned to the back of the book. Well, Reverend Rita, who wrote the book, and her church was 45 minutes away from where I lived.
Nice.
So there's another breadcrumb that I had to follow. Okay. So I attended the church a couple of times. I met Reverend Rita, And one of the weekends, the Sundays that I went there, the people that were giving the talk, and instead of doing a medium demonstration, they were talking about something called EVP, electronic voice phenomena, using a tape recorder and recording the sound of raindrops or wind or a fan on. Yes, I know there's a scary movie called White Noise, but rest assured, everybody, there's not any scary stuff that comes through. Hollywood made that movie based on something that's very, very real, because normally it's just messages of love and laughter and humor that come through in these messages. So they explained that both of them had previous marriages and that both of them had children who had passed. They said they decided to try this EVP work. There's a book called There Is No Death and There Are No Dead, written by spiritualist ministers Tom and Lisa Butler. They said they used that as their guide. They had a little digital tape recorder. They left it in the bedroom with a fan blowing, and they left the house for 20 minutes. So they played the recording of a minute of what was on that recording when they came back. It was laughter, like kids laughing, and said, "Mom and Dad, don't be scared. We're still here with you."
Wow.
And it just filled me with goosebumps, because I'm thinking, now, this is something, this is real here, because I heard it. And they also said that there's class A, B, and C recordings. Most of what anybody gets, they're just whispers, and you don't know if it's really something being said or if it's your imagination. But every once in a while, there's a message that's loud and clear. So, Tom, I go home, I buy the book, There Is No Death and There Are No Dead by Tom and Lisa Butler. I get myself a tape recorder, and I find a static channel on the radio, and I said, I'm going to record. Well, good Catholic girl, I scared the heck out of myself thinking I'm even going to do that. I put it all away. I said, this is getting a little too far-fetched. Put it away, said, this isn't for me. But the thing is I wanted to be able to share, or at least feel comfortable sharing, that I took that medium class without having that fear that people would say, oh, well, who do you see around me? Yeah. Right? And I'd be wrong, because most times I was wrong. But I also knew that I'm really starting to quench that desire to know that we go on. And that fear was like gone, right? Like, I'm no longer afraid of dying. I know we go on. And that higher self that we all have said, if you told people about this, give people hope and some comfort. But I was a fraidy cat. I didn't want to share. Who am I? And I always badmouth people who believed in this stuff. And I certainly didn't want to lose any friends or family members by discussing this. So Mom and I own the catering business. We travel. Life was crazy. I had one weekend free in, I think it was 2002 or 2005. The date's not on the top of my head. And there's a retreat center in Rhinebeck, New York, called the Omega Center. Many people are familiar with it, and they have nice, healthy food and nature walks and massages, and they teach classes. And I thought, there's going to be something that weekend there for me. I just need to get away. I just need some time for me. So what's the course that's being taught? It's Tom and Lisa Butler, for the very first and only time, teaching electronic voice phenomena.
At the place you were going.
At the place. The one weekend I had free. It's crazy. I can't make this stuff up. And so I went there again, told people I just needed a retreat and go into the Omega Center. They had art workshops also going on. I'm not a liar anymore. Please don't think that I am. But this really wrestled with my integrity, having people know that I was looking into the occult, right? Yeah. Like, I didn't want anybody to think anything bad about me. So over the course of the first couple of days, it was just a 2-night, 3-day workshop. They played tons of examples of these EVPs and how loved ones can manipulate the sounds that are recorded and make them into words. And they talked about being interviewed by a Hollywood studio about it, and they taught them everything they knew. And then they took their knowledge and turned it into a horror movie, right? So even though they were upset about that in the beginning, what it did do is it brought a lot of attention that this EVP is real. And so they started what's called the A-Trans-C, Association of Trans Communication, and they taught people how to do this along with their book. So I heard plenty of examples of this, and I had a tape recorder with me. And I said, If this is real and I'm supposed to help people, I need to hear something on my own recorder. There were only 5 students in the class, and each one of them was a bereaved, either a parent or a spouse. And everybody wanted to know this was real. So on the Saturday night, we were told if we wanted to just record the sound of white noise. Now it was pouring rain out, and you're in a nice retreat center, but it's in the woods. And so I went into the cabin and I had my tape recorder, and it was just me in this little cabin. And it wasn't scary. It sounds like a scary movie, but it wasn't. It was very safe and comfortable. And I just reached out my tape recorder and imagined that my grandmother, grandfather, and my aunt and uncle were in the room. And I said, and I pressed the record button so you can hear me say this on the recording, if this is real and I'm meant to help people believe in life after death, I said, I need to hear something. If you guys are really here with me, talk loud, and then I'll say goodnight. I just let it record 1 minute, just 1 minute. And then I said goodnight. I didn't have a computer to upload the file in, to loop it and listen and all that. But I pressed play, and about 2/3 through the recording, I got goosebumps. There was something on it, right? And I played it again. It said, "Good night, Sandra," in a man's voice. 2 women whisper, "Good night, good night." And then another male's voice says, "Good night." It sounds kind of computer generated sound, but if they're using the sounds that's on the recorder, well, okay. So you think that I had a moment when I took the medium class. I'm going to say holy cow, but I used another word when that happened, because suddenly I'm thinking they're all around me right now, that there's this invisible veil, that they are here. And then I start thinking, do we human beings have privacy? Is there just, like all of this? It was a moment of fear and delight all mixed in together, that this is real. I mean, this is real. Nobody can tell me I didn't hear that. So I brought the recording into class the next day, and I was the only one that got one loud enough for everybody to hear. And if you could see the transformation of the people in my class that then knew their child had lived on, that their spouse had lived on, like these were words. And so I went on to doing a lot of recordings just for myself. And then I would meet people who they just came into my life. These people I'd meet at a seminar or at an airport or whatever, who had lost a loved one. And we would do these recordings. And I said, I can make no guarantee that this is going to work. But people started hearing from their loved ones. And most of the messages were, I love you. But then there was also some details that I couldn't possibly know. So I thought, okay, this is the way that I can start getting this out there, that we go on. And I so wish I could tell you that launched me into telling the world about it. But I think my nerves and fear, and I very conveniently, when I say I work hard, we would work from 4 a.m. to almost midnight when I was away at the races. So I was so busy that conveniently I put this whole life after death thing on the back burner, that someday I'll tell people about it. And as time went on, I would keep meeting people, and then I got back into, I'm not going to say anything, right? Like I convinced myself that this didn't really happen to me, but of course it did. And then in January of 2010, my dear dad was diagnosed with cancer and ended up passing 5 months later. Those 5 months were the most difficult months that I have ever spent as a human being. And you talk about grief. I know you've experienced and are experiencing, and your viewers and listeners, most have been there, if not all. My dad had a tumor that was in his spine that was slowly breaking apart his spine. They handled it with radiation and chemotherapy, but they could tell it was still growing in his body. My siblings were all married with children. I was the only single kid. And so I could live anywhere. And so in between these races, I relocated with my dad and his lady friend down in Daytona Beach, Florida. And I got really, really close with my dad. And even though we had been close as kids, life happens. And so I had a real strong relationship with my dad. And there started being these real massive miscommunications with my siblings. And we're all good people, right? I got a sister 5 years younger, brother and sister twins, year older than me. And they said, Dad wants to be moved up to Connecticut, where a couple of them lived. And I said, no, he wants to stay in Florida with his friends and his lady friend. No, he wants to move. And I asked my dad, he says, no, I want to stay here. This is where my life is. And this is where I've spent many, many years now. So while I was away at one of these races, my siblings got a private medical jet airplane, and they moved him to Connecticut. Dad's calling me, I don't want to go. Okay. So I tell you, I'm always a nice girl, but I was mad. And there's Dad who didn't want to go. And my dad ended up passing, I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 weeks later. And I'm grateful that he was in a beautiful, beautiful hospital, Danbury Hospital in Connecticut, when he departed this earth. So he couldn't have gotten any better medical care. I mean, he was really in a great place. But I packed up everything. I drove to Danbury, and I was there from the moment Dad woke up in the morning to when he went to sleep at night, because it's hard, right? So my siblings were thinking, I'm guessing this is what they're thinking, because it got really bad. I'm spending too much time with my dad. He needs time to heal. He had a death sentence, right? What kind of time to heal? And they didn't have that close relationship. Long story short, grief can begin before somebody dies. There's anticipatory grief with all that fear and all those things before somebody passes, let alone the fear that we all have. And because when we love someone, this hurts to see anybody going through pain. Yeah. And so my siblings and I, the arguments, they just kept growing. And Dad ended up finally taking his last breath on May 11th of 2010. And things were just at an all-time stressful level with my siblings. They were accusing me of things that I didn't do, and conversations that they said I had with them that I didn't have. And so they wrote me off, right? Done with Sandra. The funeral was horrible. They took care of going through his things. I didn't get any of Dad's belongings or anything. Like, I was out of the family. Tom, if I can tell you, I have never hit that low as a human being ever in my life. I knew I wasn't going to end my life, but I understood for the very first time how dark a human being's existence can be, that seems like the best way out. It was beyond bad. Thankfully, there was a little something in my brain that said, this isn't you, Sandra. Something else is going on. Because I'm 59 now. I will be 59 in April. I'm usually this person, pleasant to be with, smiling, glass half full. And for me to have the anger and the fear and those uncontrollable tears and the deepest, darkest depression I could ever imagine, I thought, this is something else. So I thrust my grief into discovering grief. What the heck is it? Why does it have to hurt so bad? Why would nice, healthy sibling relationships be fighting about things that never even happened? And I didn't stop digging until I found the answers. And find the answers I did. Now, I know Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has the stages for dying that a lot of people attribute also for grieving. Nothing happens in stages. We go through that and more. But in a nutshell, this is the best way I am going to describe grief, because this is the way it works for me to understand it, is I compare our love for another human being like, and this is a terrible comparison, but if you imagine somebody who is addicted to some kind of a something, right? Chemical, whatever, and you take it away, you're going through a withdrawal, you're going through something, your body's craving having that. You would never have a conversation with somebody or give them your bank account information or, deep secrets or anything, somebody who's going through with this withdrawal. Our bodies, brains, biology, when we love someone, it is a chemical connection. And when grief happens, when a loss happens, our whole system is trying to handle the new reality without that person. And we run on things called neurotransmitters as part of our biology. Just like cars have all the different fluids you need to add to them to make them work, we have these different neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine and such. When we go through grief, these neurotransmitters are almost all depleted, and our system is kind of in a state of shock. Now, these neurotransmitters are responsible for our well-being, our mood, even how our brain functions, even our memory centers and our communication centers. So just like you can't expect someone who is going through withdrawal from a chemical to have it all together, people that are going through grief were not living in a healthy system. All of a sudden, I had this aha moment. We're fighting about things that never happened. It's because our brains aren't working. We're both seeing the same situation, but we're seeing different sides of it. Now, on top of that, I started looking into all the medications my dad was taking, right? Because he was drugged up when he was telling me, I don't want to move and all that. Is it possible that they said, Dad, did you ever want to go back home to Connecticut? Because that's where we were raised. Oh, I would love to go back to Connecticut. So I have no way of knowing for sure, but I have a real strong suspicion Dad was telling us both, something that was very real for him in that moment.
Makes sense. Yeah.
So I have a lot of compassion for my siblings. I really do. We all did the best we could, but I found things that we could do to help raise those levels of neurotransmitters, things like being in the present moment, going out for a walk, talking to people, watching something, if you can, funny or lighthearted, getting your mind off of the grief for just a little while. I wanted to explain everything I discovered about grief, the whole world. So I recorded a simple audio called How to Survive Grief, and I put it on YouTube. Easy, right? I didn't have any followers at the time, but I put it there just because I thought this is the time. I need to just share with people what I know. Next thing I know, somebody would have a loss, and I'd said, oh, well, I have this audio, right? And so they'd listen to it, make them feel better. Well, two friends told two friends, and you know how that spreads. I started receiving emails, Tom, from people that said that audio was so important to them, but not only did it give them understanding and tools, I had people say they chose not to kill themselves because of listening to it, because I described exactly how they were feeling, and they were able to say, what I'm feeling is grief. It's not me. It's not me. And we human beings are not trained about grief. I mean, thankfully, there are great shows like yourself, your own, and some other good people really out in the world sharing it, but we're not trained for this. So I had that moment, and I just thought I need to get these words out as far as I can. And I had another interesting thing happen right before my dad died. Dad was very Catholic. He went to church every single day, and all he wanted to do was be a good person and do Jesus's work. And Dad had cancer 30 years prior to his own death, and he's one of those miracle stories of mind over matter and healing. And my dad went on to raise a lot of money for Dr. Bernie Siegel's exceptional cancer patients group, and he worked with cancer patients and AIDS patients. Like, my dad was a giver. And so before Dad passed, I felt like I needed to tell him about this other side of Sandra, who was researching life after death. And I was so afraid to tell him because I thought, Dad's going to think I'm nuts, right? Gosh. Because I've had some people that are heavy into religion thinking I'm doing the devil's work, which I'm not, But anyways, on this one occasion, I decided to tell Dad just like I got to tell you what I've learned and discovered. And, he looked at me with his big brown eyes like, oh my God, right? But he listened. And in the moment that I was talking to him, although I'm not a practicing medium, and even though I every so often I'll take a little course, I don't work with people, I don't do mediumship. But while I was talking to my dad, in my mind's eye, I saw a yellow Piper Cub airplane with black letters. And I feel a man laughing, saying, "Tell your dad I did get to bring my toys with me." Okay. And now this image wouldn't go away. And so I said, "Dad, you're going to, you're listening to all this. You might think I'm crazy." So I told him. My dad's eyes filled with tears, Tom. He had a friend named Jim who had cancer. And my dad would go out bike riding with him every morning before he got too sick. And he said, "Jim, you got to beat this. You got to beat this. You can't take your toys with you. You got to beat this." And Tom was a pilot, and he had a yellow Piper Cub with black letters. Yeah. So with all this happening while Dad was still fairly lucid, he made me promise that I write a book. So I had that lingering. And so once that grief audio made such a difference, and I had compiled notes on everything I had studied, one thing led to another. I went to a writing workshop, right? Because I'm like, how does one write a book? And I meet a publisher, and I ended up telling him my story. I had the courage to do that. And his father had just passed. And he says, "Have you ever written before?" And I said, "No." He says, "I want you to do this." He says, "What you would think would be 2 chapters." He says, "I want you to pretend you're writing just to me. You don't need big words. Just tell me your story and just imagine it's me you're talking to." And so I figured out how to come up with a book proposal. I looked that up, what a book proposal is. And then I attached it to those 2 chapters and sent it to him. And he said, "How soon can you have the whole thing written?" "We want to publish you." And that was the start of my book, We Don't Die, A Skeptic's Discovery of Life After Death. And the rest of it in all these years, because now it's going to be 15 years since my dad's passed, all I can say is I have been introduced to the right people. I think I'm the perfect messenger for this because I was so anti all of this. And now I have such a backbone to share. And I went on to studying so much more about the afterlife. And the only reason I started We Don't Die, the podcast, was because I was working so hard and I wanted to learn more, but I didn't have time to invest in reading books or going to seminars. So I had worked with a friend and helped him start a podcast. And I thought, oh, maybe I could interview people about life after death and put those stories out there. And little did I know, it became an internet sensation, and made such a difference with people. So I continue to this day with the 2 podcasts, interviewing great people like yourself, hearing their stories and just putting them out in the world. And there's no agenda to it. It's just to share, because when we learn things for ourselves, it's natural to want to share. And while I was so frightened that people would think I was crazy, there's really been only one person who had wanted to do an intervention. And she was a big born again Christian, very holy roller, and, cast out the demons and, did a nice prayer for me. So I just said, thank you, right? What does one do? But other than that, people that I worked with or customers that would come under our food tent, everybody has a story of loss. And I was able to share. So if any of your listeners or your viewers want a free PDF copy of my book, you can have it on my main page at wedon'tdie.com. There's a little place to enter your name and your email address to join my email list. It says you only get the first few chapters of the book. The secret is you start reading it, it's the whole book. Chapter 10 is that grief audio plus. So there's a lot more that I found out about grief. So if anyone's grieving and needs a resource, I'd recommend chapter 10 first. And then, you can read the other stuff as well and listen to the podcasts. So I'm going to let you talk
fess
now.
up. I'm going to fess up because, and folks, yes, we said it in passing, but Sandra was so gracious to have me on We Don't Die. And it's not released yet, though. So I'll be,
soon.
we're recording this now. We record all these and you'll be released on this Sunday. So, sometime after that, probably on your stuff. But, so, and I'll quickly tell that story because I told it on your podcast, but, one of my last guests was Roseanne Norris. She was my last guest because I did a solo one last time. And Roseanne is an affiliate leader for Helping Parents Heal in Binghamton, New York. And we met at the conference, the Helping Parents Heal conference, because I had a Buffalo Bills shirt on, and she's a Bills fan too. And she said her husband said, "Go Bills!" And so we met that way. Long story short, I had her on the podcast, and then afterwards, or during the podcast, she mentioned that she had gotten associated with you, came to your conference, I think, and you met through that, I guess. And then, so during my course of healing and grief, I've had some of those instances of people who, I've listened to their things, or there was a guided meditation gentleman from Australia, Jason Stevenson, who somebody sent me a link to, and it really helped me to calm and during the throes of the early grief, and just get centered in things, and it really helped me. So I sent him a message and I just said, "Thank you. What you're doing means something." And I told him my story a little bit and just wanted to encourage him that he helped somebody. And so he sent me back a beautiful message. And so I've done that to a few different people, David Kessler as well, who I've done things with him. And so when she mentioned you, I heard We Don't Die very early on in things, and you're so inviting and engaging, and so you're so welcoming, and you feel that right away when you listen to your podcast, and so it was very refreshing to listen to that all the time, and I did regularly. And so, and I knew of Coast to Coast and all of that too, so I thought the connections were neat, and I'm like, well, Sandra, she's somebody, so don't give me that look. For those who aren't looking, who aren't watching anyways.
I'm
Yeah,
just me. I mean,
we're
you're
all
just
just us. Yeah,
you.
that's exactly
Yeah, that's
right.
right.
So when I had Roseanne on the show, and afterwards when she mentioned you, I sent her an email and I said, "What do you think would be the best way to get a hold of Sandra so I could send her a message?" And that's pretty much all I sent to her, because that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to thank you. And she sends me an email back and she says, "I got in contact with Sandra and she says that she would love to have you on We Don't Die and she wants to be on your podcast." And I was just blown away, which is awesome. And thank you for that, by the way.
Thank you for
Absolutely.
having me. You didn't have to say
Incredible.
yes.
So that's how we got acquainted and everything. And but I'm fessing up now, because way back when, early on, when I first started listening to your podcast and you said about the book, I signed up for it and I got the PDF and everything, but I never read it. And I should have, because I went through it before we got talking together, and I listened to the audiobook, and man, I should have. I definitely should have, because those grief chapters are incredible. I think there's 2 that really cover grief in there, isn't there? 10 and 11 or something like that. And all the other things that you give scientific data for, and all the things that are going on in research for some of the paranormal things, or paranormal, but, metaphysical, and all the things that you've done and explored, and things that you've learned from other people. So neat. And I'm learning from so many people too on the podcast, which is great to interview people and get a double hit kind of. It's nice. So I want to encourage everybody, definitely get the book, and especially, and if you're grieving, don't wait, read it and read that chapter, because you lay it out so nice and so just, very structured and very simple for people to understand, and very relatable, which I think is the biggest thing.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. When I had to send it to the printer, read it one last time before it went to print, I thought I had heard my words enough. Like I don't want to say I was sick of it, because this was my passion, but you read something over and over and it's like, oh, okay, let's make this happen already. Well, the night before I had to read it one last time, I had to put my cat to sleep. Now, I had Millie for years, and I tell you, I was never a cat person. This cat snuck into my house and snuck into
Hmm.
my heart. So I had love that you wouldn't imagine. So we put Millie to sleep. I was living with my aunt at the time, and I was devastated. And then I had to read the book. And I think that is little Millie's soul's gift to me, because there I was in the deepest throes of grief. And, you know, people who don't know this yet, but when you experience grief after a big loss, it just like opens it all up again. You know,
Hmm.
all the pain of loss, uh, from my dad, from my grandmother, just everything. It just all kicks right back in. And so when I read it, I thought, this is something that needs to be shared with the world. I saw the power in the words, and also just the impact it had on me, helping me understand grief, what it is I'm feeling, and then how to get back into life, and then what I knew at the time about the afterlife. And since then, I've learned so much more. There's so many other reasons to believe. But I saw firsthand on the court how those words impact grief. And don't worry about not reading it then, Tom, because we come to things at our own time. And I actually wrote the book. Sometimes I think I wrote it for myself, because it's more a handbook for living. There's so many quotes and different things about working through fear and going after your dreams, and who are we as human beings, and this little voice that we have in our head that's never positive, how we deal with that. So there's so much more. It's a handbook for living, and I you can pick it up anytime, open to a random page, and there'll be something
It
to
is, and
inspire you.
that's a
So
great part of it too. Is that I always I have a heart for the people who are in early grief, and I'm pretty early on myself still, but
mhm.
I keep going back because and I said a few words last night at the Compassionate Friends have a worldwide event on the second Sunday of December every year, and it's a candle lighting, and it sweeps the world, and it's I guess it's the largest one in the world now. And so I was asked locally here to say a few words on hope, and at this one, and my approach is that I'm nobody at all special. I got up there. In fact, I said I'm not a speaker. I'm not, even though I have a lot of experience in all those things, but I was here as one of them, and one of them as a friend. And so talked about those things. And then I took, those people who are so early on in grief, and I sensed that some were there. You can tell by emotions and things. And so I have such a heart for them, but your grief chapter is perfect for them. And to start just inching in and getting by the day by day, the moment by moment that you need to do at that point. And, there's very practical things in there on how to take care of yourself at that time. And that's the most important thing. And then the rest of your book, you can branch out as you go. And that's the awesome part that's like cherries on the sundae right there. The rest of it with the afterlife things and the things that now and that you've experienced. And so it's so awesome to have that available. Like you don't have to go there yet, but when you're ready, go ahead and go out there and branch out, and things will happen for you like that too, and you'll experience those. I love too that I think that you've seen a progression in your life, things happening here, back in the past that have led up to where you are now. And I see that in my life too now, where all of a sudden we're at this different phase. And this time everything up to this time was meant for that, my experiences that I'm having now. And so, yeah. And you talked about all those little things, first the religious aspect. I was a pastor for 15 years, and just felt that God was bigger. There was something bigger out there. And, it's not in any contrast really to religion and things and spirituality. And, we believe in prayer still and all of those things. So, it's not like you disqualify things or anything like that. It's just that get on your path, keep your eyes open and keep your heart open as you're moving forward on your path, no matter where you are, because we're not And then that was one of the most freeing things I heard too. Someone who's involved in all of this that we talk about, and they said, I'm not here to try and convince you of anything, and I'm not trying to recruit you or anything like that. I'm just telling you my story. And it's so freeing because that's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to tell you. And, that's why I talk about what was the reaction. I sit there and think of myself in something like that happening. And I've had some things happen which are pretty remarkable. Last night at the event, as a matter of fact, I'm standing there, and this does not happen to me all the time. I've had some occurrences which I certainly attribute to the spirit world. And I was standing there, and there's about 40 people in the event, and I just sensed the spirits. I sensed things around the children there, the people there, and I just felt it. It was just like there's something in the wind, whatever. I don't know. It's so hard to describe, as anybody will tell you who experiences these kind of things. But it was so awesome. And I will tell you too what happened. It was the most amazing thing. You'll love this story. There is it's a beautiful garden area. It's right near the town hall in the town where this took place. And the money was contributed, for the whole thing. There's a little sculpture there of like doves, foil doves and things. And there's swings. And then there's where they put up the plaques and the names on like a fence there. And it's a beautiful garden area. And it was nighttime, and they had it lit up a little bit with some LED lighting, and it looked nice. There was this big pine tree there, and they were talking about the tree growing. So maybe it was planted when it started, but I looked at the tree and I thought it would look so nice with some lights on it, just white Christmas lights, whatever. It just would look nice. And I just thought that. I'll cut to the chase here. After the whole event, I went back home, and the director sent me a text, and it's a picture of the tree, and it's lit up. And she said, these lights have not lit since COVID. And we were all leaving the area, and the tree lit up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gave me goosebumps.
Amazing. I didn't even know there were lights on the tree. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And she sent me that. So it was just remarkable. But folks, I tell that story because, and you, Sandra, you're a normal person. And I'm a normal person. And, because I always think from the skeptic side, I guess, like you said, and that's so great that you put skeptic in there, because we all are, and we all think that way. And still, even when these things happen, sometimes we don't think of them, right? The same way. Does that experience for you?
Absolutely. I wake up in the morning and I forget all this. That's part of being human. And I think there's a game called life. It's not fun. It's not the game called life. It's the life we're living. And I choose to believe this on my own. This is just the way I get through life, is to think that there is a place before life, the afterlife, spirit world, whatever you wish to call it, heaven, that it's all good all of the time, that life is grand, it's everything, but that doesn't provide any soul growth to us. And so we need a place where there's negatives and positives and other people and different things to learn. And so that I think we came to this life to like, hey, sign me up. I want the most soul growth possible. And they say, but here's the thing, you're going to forget who you really are. Mm. Oh, it's all right. I can handle it. So we go through life, and it's hard. There's some nice things that happen, don't get me wrong, but it's brutal. But on each one of these situations that happen, each one give us an opportunity, not just for that soul growth, to learn about ourselves, to learn about others, and most importantly, to be in service of others. And it could be on an airplane trip. You meet somebody that's had a loved one pass, and just what you say about your experience is just the thing they need to hear. So all of that makes a difference. And so we live life forgetting who we are. And I think that's intentional, but I do think we have these random psychic hits and the tree lighting up and different things that happen. And then we have at 2 p.m. every single Sunday, we have a free Sunday gathering inspirational service, non-denominational. They are as powerful as you can get and fun with music videos and things. But at the end of each one, we have a medium demonstration. And I work with some great mediums that are in the UK that are fantastic. Sometimes we have guest mediums as well. And so the people in our online congregation, which is usually between 150 and 200 people every week, some people get messages. But for everybody else, you're hearing just how close the loved ones are. And you're also, the messages that come through, you think, I could use a little bit of that for my life. So I get to witness miracles every single Sunday to help remind me of the bigger picture. Also, I get to interview great people like yourself and come on shows and be able to talk about it. And once we start talking about these things, it's like, hey, I remember who I am. Hey, I remember. So I'm going out with my mom for dinner after this, and you can believe it, we're going to have a great conversation. I'm going to be in a great mood because like my soul is lit up remembering. So I think anybody listening or watching right now, I think we all need people. People need people. We need to tune into a great podcast or read a good book or be connected somehow to other people that speak this language, because it is natural and normal for us to forget. And then add on top of it grief. Oh, it's awful. So to be able to stay connected. And so that's why I have all the different podcast episodes and things. And, some people listen to me and it puts them to sleep at night, in a nice way, just to hear somebody believes in this and my loved one has gone on. And I know we don't have time today to go into my 101 reasons to believe in the afterlife, but they certainly are there within my different podcasts. There's so many different things with technology and with, how our souls receive information and deathbed visitations and near-death experiences. Of course, there's zillions of those where there's valid, verifiable information of what people have seen when they've left their body that's accurate. There's a lot going on. And even Dr. Eben Alexander, who wrote Proof of Heaven, I heard him speak at a conference it was on YouTube, but basically he was talking about skeptics. And there's two kinds of skeptics. There's closed-minded skeptic and open-minded skeptic. We have people in our lives that we can't talk about this stuff to. Nope, we die, yeah. Right? It's the way it is. Closed-minded, don't even try, right? Don't even try. You should be able to express yourself, if they're willing to listen, fine. If not, find some other friends that do. But then there's people like me that I was an open-minded skeptic. It was the fear that had me like, oh, let me see if something's here. And then all of a sudden, one of those wild experiences led to another, led to some of the best friends that I have in life. And being skeptical is good because there are con artists and weirdos out there. So it's good. But there comes a point, I think, in our journeys that you go from a hope to a belief to a knowing. And then we just need reminders. We need to stay plugged in and to have our own experiences. And I just want to say one more thing is when I took that medium class and I saw how our loved ones work through our imagination, please, friends, don't chalk something up that you're feeling to your imagination. If you get, whether it's in a dream or during the day, or you're driving the car and you're in the zone and all of a sudden you feel the presence of your loved one or a memory comes up, those are just little calling cards that they say, we're here with you. We've got to be in that space. And the more we can relive happy memories, that opens the door wide open. I think there's something about our emotions that raises our vibrations, those good emotions anyways. And next thing you know, all of a sudden you may pay more attention, but there might be songs that come on the radio, or you might hear more of these thoughts that come into your mind. I have a former boyfriend who died just about 2 years ago. And I tell you, he was one funny man with the one-liners, right? And he and I did a lot of traveling. And so I could be working, doing something, and like all of a sudden, there I am on the beach with him in Cabo San Lucas. Like, okay, you're here, right? Once I was boarding an airplane and a really twisted one-liner came into my mind that I did not put there. And I thought, that's you. That's you. You're here, still here. And then I have a friend who's a medium, but she knew nothing about this guy. And I just asked her, is there any chance I could pay for a reading with you? And she said, I'm not going to take your money, Sandra. And she spent just a half hour with me. And I had a dating coach once, and she says, if you're not engaged to somebody or married to them, keep them off social media, right? Because you never know what's going to happen in a relationship. So there's no way she could have found anything. And she must have had 30 different shared memories between the two of us that she brought up. And I'm like, oh my God. And there was an apology there for how things ended and such, but that he's right by my side and he's going to keep entertaining me with the funny stuff. So it was him. And it's just all these little signs. Don't be so quick to say it's my imagination, because that's how they work. Yeah. And we're going to see them again, folks. We're going to see them again, and they're still part of our life.
I would tell people too, don't go by, I don't know, I guess I would say the media in general, but it's not always negative. But some of the things that you're told out there, or Hollywood, or those kind of things, have skewed what we're learning as reality and in this field. Correct. And things. So open your heart, keep it open, and take your steps forward. That's all we have done, and that's all you can do. And we're all at different places, and that's fine. That's all good. You're at your place. And I always tell everybody, if you're hearing this today, there's no coincidences. You're here listening for a reason. And so perhaps that's to open up your heart today and just look into these things and start exploring. And most of all, if you're in a grieving situation, to definitely take the steps to get your help in whatever way it may be. And certainly Sandra's book and that chapter are a great place to start and take those steps too, because you can't do it alone. We're not meant to be alone. So you need to work through it. So Sandra, thank you so much for giving us so much time today. I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm sure pleasure. The audience is going to enjoy every bit of it. And I'm sure we could have a lot more to talk about. So go on and
Agreed.
on. So, but thank you. Anything else that you might want to share in closing?
I think, yes. I think we need to, or it would be a good idea to look at life like everything's a miracle. Albert Einstein said that we could look through at life as either nothing's a miracle or everything is a miracle. We human beings get so caught up in our day-to-day lives, and we think this is reality. And I do think it's an illusion. If we put a little camera in one of the little atoms that makes us up, we're just vibrating invisible energy, right? Like that's what we are. And we're living on a planet in an ever-expanding universe. When you think of our computers and our cell phones that can get into, you can see pictures and talk to people all over. I mean, and it all comes from the basic earth, right? Rock, mineral, vegetation, and everything we have here. We are living in a miracle. We truly are. And just to think, okay, is it possible, really possible, that I am the soul having a human experience? And the things that happen to me, although in the moment they hurt really bad, but trust in a year or two or whatever it takes, you're going to see, and I promise you'll see this, that you going through what you did made you the person you are so that you can make a difference with someone else. And so as much as it hurts and as much as we don't understand it, just say, okay, all is well. This is it. This is life. Okay, I don't understand it, but keep taking that step forward, even though we don't know where we're going. Keep taking the step forward in the areas of your interests and your dreams. Trust that in this invisible space around you, your people are there. They are there. They still are in the afterlife doing things and keeping busy, but they can easily have one foot in our world, keeping an eye on us, that we're supported, we're never alone, and that we are each just these perfect, beautiful souls. Be gentle on ourselves. And you don't have to listen to that negative voice in your head. Just keep in touch with these great podcasts, and you'll never be alone. Yeah, I think that's it.
I think that is because a lot of people say, like, near-death experience people come back and everybody's like, well, why wouldn't you just want to go back there? It's because you learn about how precious and amazing this life is that we're given. And they come back and they have a purpose. And when that purpose is being fulfilled in you, there's nothing more exciting. You are fulfilled in life, and you don't have the fear of death anymore, which I no longer have in understanding about these things. And came across something thinking about it that I no longer fear life either. And so, that can really give you an amazing life. And so
Absolutely.
if you're hurting today, that can happen for you too. So thank you so much, Sandra. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.